Guyana is a relatively young country. Despite that, our history is tied to the history of other countries, powers that, for a short period of time, were in charge of running the country's affair. So our history is tied up um, with Dutch history, French, Spanish, English, I guess, and some of it American history.
Mm-hmm.
Why I say this is because our literary history also is tied up with the literary history of other countries. And our history is unfolding. The whole story is not known. There are bits and pieces every which way you turn. People like stories, people like to write. And I'm sure there are stories hidden away for quite a long time. A case in point is this very book, Years of High Hopes. Years of High Hopes. And I like what you said about this whole production, is that you wanted to give back or share with Guyana a part of its history. That part is captured in this book during a certain period, 1952 to 1956. Quite an interesting period of time. It took a lot of the work of that in doing this. And we must say that we're thankful and grateful for bringing this slice of our history back to us. Where did it all start? I mean, over 700 pages, and I'm sure there are more letters to work on. But where did it all start?
I think it started with my trip here in 1994 with my dad, who had taught at Queen's during the period covered by the book. In 94, Queen's had its sesquicentennial, and the former masters were all invited back.
Mm-hmm.
And some of his former students encouraged him to go. Well, he invited me to come with him, and I thought, I'll never know my birthplace if I don't go with him. I won't know what to look for.
Yeah,
So we came together, and it was extraordinary to be here, but a confusing trip for me, hard to get my bearings.
Mainly because you left at a
5 months.
5 months.
Yeah, I didn't. I can't quite say I didn't remember anything because there is something there, but to stick with this chronology for the moment, I think I was here with him for 10 days in 94, and it was enough to whet my appetite. Time went by, and my mother died in 2001, and I inherited the letters that she had sent to her parents. They were in a box, all numbered in order.
Wow.
You know, they were clearly considered valuable for who knows what, but they were never, no one ever thought of throwing them out. And one winter in my apartment in Brooklyn, it was snowing outside, you know, I sat down and spent quite a bit of time taking each letter out of its envelope and reading it. And, you know, it's a funny thing to read what your parents were like before you knew them. This is just personally a strange and interesting adventure. And my sister, who was 5 months old when they moved down here. I found that very captivating, but, you know, that's a family story. But when I was rereading them, I thought, this isn't just a family story. I have such a sense of what's going on there. Different people who appear, and then they're gone for a while, and then they come back. Some of these are tradespeople who show up at the house to polish the floor or to do work in the kitchen. My sister's nanny is a marvelous character in the letters. I don't know her last name.
Wow.
But the relationships that my parents had with different Guyanese I found compelling. And then they observed things, especially in the year or so they were living on Parade Street, looking right out on the street. There was so much to see, so much going on. Part of the coronation festivities involved people.
Wow, right, right. The ground is named Parade Ground, where I suppose all the ceremonial things or official ceremonies would have taken place around that time.
That's right. Yeah, there were, the Princess Royal paid a visit, and, you know, they could see all of this right out the window.
Wow.
It was wonderful. So all of that's in the letters, and sometimes neighbors or colleagues from Queen's College would come over to get the view. It was such a good view. So then you have them interacting with one another, you know. There's so much life in these letters. So I thought, it's wrong for me to be the only one who knows about this. I mean, the people who wrote them, I mean, my mother was not around. The people who received them were gone. It's just me reading this. That's no good. It's really something that belongs here. And I might not have come to that conclusion if the timing were different. But those years of 52 to 56, as you said, were so important to the colony pushing toward its independence. And I thought, this just has to be published. Somehow I have to make this happen. Well, it's fine to have the conviction. It's hard to make it a reality.
Yeah. How did you get that push to bring it to fruition?
I
What pushed you? What pushed you? Some of the factors.
I think I was largely just feeling intuitively that it was important to do. I didn't have support from friends. They found it sort of confusing. Some of my friends kept thinking I was writing a novel. I said, no, it's not a novel. This is real. My dad was supportive of the idea. That helped me a lot.
All right.
He read after I finished typing all of these letters, he read the transcript, and so did his second wife, and that was good for me to get their response. I knew that, I had two goals in mind with the book. The first, of course, was for it to be available to Guyanese. The second was to try to capture some interest of Americans, because it just seems ridiculous that Guyana is so little known by America when we're so close together.
And is there something in that story that Americans can relate to?
Well, that was part of the chore, was to figure out how to get them to connect. And I knew that just reading the letters wasn't enough. If they wouldn't know enough to get in. I did feel that once they got in, they'd be hooked. But I thought that presenting some of the conundrums that I found in '94, the difference between what I was seeing, it was a struggling period then, certainly economically, between then and the 50s, I thought, well, that's a way to make it kind of interesting, just the contrast, and that I didn't understand it. I couldn't get my bearings. So it becomes an adventure to try to know the place.
Yeah. And we all like a bit of adventure in our life.
Yes,
We all
that's
like.
true.
We talking about values, the value of a certain book. We can look at this book from various angles. There is the historical value. There's the social, cultural values. And you've added now a literary value to it. Yeah. So from what angle did you compile these books? Or is it that you've used all of those angles?
I think I used them all. I don't think I was analytical enough to have them separated in my mind. I just knew that as I went, I kept finding things in the letters, references to people and events and foods and all kinds of things that I
Wow.
didn't know what they were. Sometimes my parents didn't know what they were, but I thought, the information must be out there, and if I'm going to do this, I have to find out so that I can write the endnotes and make it clear. Boy, and sometimes the food things, I think my mother described casserite but didn't know the word. That was one thing. Richard Alsop, one of the masters at Queen's College, referred to a man who had come from Africa. There was a whole thing about the English in Africa, stationed in Africa, being much more critical of blacks than in Guyana. Yeah. And this man was transferred to BG, and he was so outrageous and so disliked that he lost his position. He was transferred somewhere else. And I thought, well, who would this be? There must be something about this. And after some poking around, I found it. But, it just kept growing, the quest to build a real narrative. So I don't know, the historical aspect kept growing.
Right. And who really carried the narrative? Your mother, I think, that carried the...
Well,
she's sort of a remarkable person in that the way you describe how she kept those letters tells me that there is more to your mother than perhaps we see in the book and in the letters. A remarkable woman, and we'll talk some about this remarkable woman. But it takes a lot to carry a narrative for that length, over 700 pages. Talk about your mother's role in carrying the narrative.
I think one thing is that she was very young. She was 22 when they moved to Georgetown. Her baby was 5 months old, and she was alone a lot because my dad immediately started going off on field trips to St. Cuthbert's and other places. He was looking for botanical specimens. This was nothing she had anticipated doing in her life. And so I feel that her letters were kind of a response to feeling cut off.
Or dealing with the loneliness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she really wrote from her heart to her mother, her parents.
Wow.
I wish I had their letters, but I don't, back to her. And then as she got more acclimated to BG, you kind of feel that she's more confident. By the time I was born, in the fall of '55, she really seemed more comfortable being in charge within her household. But I do feel that loneliness was part of it.
Let's locate your father, your family in Georgetown.